If you're a fanatic of the unknown, unfamiliar, and enjoy creepy tales in story format, then welcome to Graves Inn. We upload 1 to 2 times weekly, so hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to ring that bell for all notifications. Now on with our story. The mind is a complex thing. What explanations do we have for voices we hear when no one is there, or the visions we see when we know it's not real? Is this what paranormal is? All things we see, hear, and feel that has no place in a sane reality? Why do our minds try to rationalize the things we don't understand? Why can't we accept it as reality? Why do we get scared when we can't explain or find a rationale for things going on around us? Why do some people see things and others don't? Is it just our mind making these things up? Is it our minds that create what we call paranormal? Why is it more often than not the ghost that stands before us is someone we don't even know? Someone we've never met in this life? Who taught us to be non-believers? Why do small children see things adults can't? Who tells us we're crazy? Is it society? Is it science? Or is it simply our mind protecting us from a reality we don't understand? I believe those of us who are true believers are searching for answers to a reality we will eventually face. The greatest fear is death, and it is death that drives our thirst for the paranormal. We're all searching for answers, and maybe if we're ever able to fully open our mind to the unknown and fully accept the concept of there being more than what we know on this earth, we may eventually satisfy the hope inside of us. These are the questions we ask ourselves every day. When you lose someone you love, you begin to evaluate what time you have left. It makes you ask questions there are no answers for. A woman in her mid-60s began preparing for death months in advance. Somehow, she knew her time was growing near. She began giving away things she had treasured her entire life, dividing things up between her 2 children. She knew death was coming, and she was preparing. How did she know? Was it through her dreams? Was it just a feeling, or was it something we call paranormal? A few days before her death, she dreamed about her mother and father, who had already passed, knocking on her door and telling her they had come to take her home. In her last moments, I wonder, were they there with her, waiting to take her home? The night she took her last breath, her son was there and started CPR until the paramedics arrived. The daughter, who was almost 2 hours away, was called, and she immediately began her journey to get to her mother. The daughter prayed the entire way, begging God not to take her mother from her. A few miles from the hospital, a voice said to her, "She's been without oxygen too long. Is this what you want for your mother? Confined to a bed, not really living, only surviving?" The daughter, with tears in her eyes, said no, and this is when she knew her mother was not going to live. The daughter finally made it to the hospital and joined the family. Fear filled the room as the doctor walked through the door, confirming what they already knew. She didn't leave her family until she knew they were all together, and she knew they were at peace with letting her go. 8 years later, an elderly man who had everything to live for suddenly gave up. Why? Did he have the wisdom of the unknown? Was it revealed in his last days? He told his daughter just a few weeks prior he couldn't live forever, and she had to come to terms with the inevitable. She lived in fear of losing her father and refused to let him go. The night he went to the hospital, no one expected he wouldn't be returning home. It was a simple infection, and they thought it would be treated and he would be back home in a few days, just like every time before. But this time was different. It was weeks of ups and downs. The daughter and son were faced with having to make many hard decisions. Their father had been on a respirator for over a week and was showing no signs of responsiveness. The son and daughter had to make the decision to take him off, and if things didn't go well, they had decided not to resuscitate. After meeting the doctor that morning, they walked in the room, and their father, who had not opened his eyes in over a week, was lying there wide awake. They removed the respirator and everything was fine. He was responding to questions and commands and was even able to speak. He seemed to be fully aware of his surroundings. This was a great day. Their dad stayed awake most of the day, and they both stayed by his bedside talking and trying to interact with him. But something on the other side of the room kept drawing his attention from them. He would move his eyes to the other side of the room and just stare at nothing. Nothing was there. They didn't understand what he was looking at, why he was focusing on an area of the room where nothing or no one was. What was he looking at? The daughter and son thought their father was going to be fine, but over the next couple of days, he had to have another procedure which required sedation, and this time he didn't come out of it. The daughter and son would not give up, and they kept fighting the doctors who wanted to just let him die. The father held on for several more days and was finally moved back to the ICU. The day before he passed, he opened his eyes and the family was able to talk to him. Even though he wasn't able to speak, they were all able to interact with him and tell him how much they loved him. The night before he passed, his granddaughter spent the night at the hospital. At around 3 a.m., he began seizing. The nurses couldn't do anything to stabilize him, so his granddaughter took control. She started talking to him and got his breathing back to normal. She pulled a chair up beside his bed, took his hand in hers, and this is when arms embraced her and hands capped hers and her grandfather's. When this happened, a sense of peace filled the room, and suddenly everything became clear. The granddaughter knew who was in the room with them and why her papa was now calm. The woman who had passed 8 years earlier was there waiting to guide the love of her life home. They now know what he focused his attention to on the other side of the room. That's who he was looking at when he woke up. His loving wife who was there patiently waiting on him. The granddaughter called everyone in and explained what had happened, and with tears in her eyes, she told them it was time to let him go. Everyone gathered around the bed and had their special moment. They all told him how much they loved him and told him it was okay. They were finally ready to let him go. An overwhelming sense of peace filled the room as tears filled their eyes. In an instant, he was gone. This was a husband and a wife who both knew their time was drawing near. A daughter who days before her mother drew her last breath was awakened from a deep sleep by her mother's voice calling her name. The same daughter hearing her father call her name in the middle of the night, just days before he went to the hospital. A granddaughter feeling the warm embrace of her grandmother, even though she couldn't see her. Is this what paranormal is? Hearing, seeing, and feeling things we can't explain? Putting all the pieces together later on for a better story, rationalizing each event for a better ending. I am the daughter, and this is my story. I still don't understand, but I'm not trying to rationalize the events. I have more questions than answers, and I will continue to search for a better understanding. What is there after death? Why haven't our loved ones come back to share the secret? To tell us what's on the other side? Is it because if they did, there would be no more suspense, no more searching, no more questions, nothing to keep us pressing forward? Without fear, do we really live? The story would already have an ending, and that would be a pretty boring reality. We all have a story to tell. Sometimes it's hard, but sometimes it does help to let others know how you feel. And don't ever be afraid to tell your truth. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you liked our story. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button at the bottom, or you too may find yourself in the midst of a paranormal experience that has no answers.